Okay, calm down. You got nervous, man. You got nervous, man. Okay, calm down.
Hello and welcome to this special Friday night live stream. We are responding today to the announcement from the Supreme Court about Roe v. Wade. And I wanted to make sure, sorry, I'm looking a little upset because it's a very dark time. But okay, here we go. We're doing a show. It's going to be a very informative show, a very important show. And so we're doing the show because I want people to understand what just happened with the Roe v. Wade decision. And we have a great guest to tell us what happened, to walk us through how it happened, why it happened, what we can expect next, and how we can maybe actually fight back against this. And that great guest is Samuel Moyn, who's the Henry R. Luce Professor of Jurisprudence at Yale Law School and Professor of History at Yale University. He's also the author of several great books, including Humane, How the United States Abandoned Peace and Reinvented War. So without further ado, we're just going to bring Samuel Moyn onto the show. Hi, how are you?
Hey, nice to be back.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for coming. It's always great. You always help out when we're in these scary times and provide, if not an easy fix, at least some clarity about what happened. So can you just walk people through what the court decided, like the technicality of how they decided it, legally speaking?
Sure. Obviously, it's a very dark day. In Roe v. Wade, a 1973 Supreme Court case, there was discovered a right to an abortion in the United States Constitution. And this decision today essentially deletes that right. And this was kind of no surprise. I mean, the opinion actually almost identical leaked a few months ago, and it was understood not just that Roe was likely to fall, but that what the reasoning, that we saw in today's opinion, what it would look like, and it remained intact. Essentially, the reasoning in the opinion for the court, which is written for 5 justices by Samuel Alito, says that there is no right to an abortion in the Constitution. He can't find it. And it's true that there are other rights in the Constitution that aren't mentioned that the Supreme Court will protect. They're called unenumerated rights, not like the Bill of Rights where they're listed and specified, but they're found somewhere in between different articles, or in the due process clause of the 5th or 14th Amendment. Alito says this one's different. This one is just too dubious to keep. And so he had 5 votes to ditch it, and he did.
What made it dubious?
Well, in his view, to be enforced by the court, a right that's unenumerated like this has to have some historical backing. And much of the opinion is devoted to showing that the whole idea that a woman might have a right to an abortion is new. It has no basis in America's traditions. And especially, it's the case, he insists, that when the 14th Amendment was passed by Congress and ratified by the states after the Civil War, no one could have thought that it covered a right to an abortion. Now, we can get into this, but there are other rights that have been discovered, like the right to contraception, which he assures us are not under threat, but are also on the newer side of things. Actually, there's an interesting list of such rights that now might be in danger. But Alito's basic view in the opinion is that the right to an abortion is unique even if it's true that, it's new, he adds that it's the only right that judges have invented, found in the Constitution, even though they're unenumerated, that also affects someone else so profoundly. And of course, he means the fetus. Now,
Right.
it's also been, hinted by some commentators that this decision is going to be a stepping stone to finding that there's fetal personhood protected by the Constitution. He doesn't go there. Actually, no one goes there
Right.
in the opinions today. But it's very significant that he says what's special about this right, what's noxious about it, is not just that it's new, but it's a right that allows people to trample other lives, namely the lives of uh, uh, the fetus. And so that's his stated rationale for excising it from the list of rights we're supposed to enjoy as American citizens.
And were there any major differences, by the way, between the draft and the final decision?
No, the only differences uh, are really in his response to the dissents. So, the usual process is that a majority opinion is written, and justices who haven't voted to join that majority have an opportunity to protest, write a dissent. And in this case, pretty unusually, the three dissenting justices, the liberals, wrote a common dissent. It came out under the all three of their names, and Alito took the opportunity to basically say that their objections were groundless, and he just added those in the midst of his opinion, but otherwise there weren't major changes. And I think there will be a lot of discussion about how much he was paying attention, he and his clerks, and the conservative justices and their clerks in general, because of course the leaked draft, got a huge amount of attention
Right.
when it came out. But it's not as if there was an attempt to answer the public, only the arguments that the dissenting justices made in their dissent.
And very quickly, I forgot to say this earlier, but please like this stream because this is a very important stream. We want to make sure that people join us. And I'm very grateful that we already have a lot of people watching now, but like this stream and subscribe to this channel so that you never miss any of these important streams. So what's the significance of their writing a joint dissent as opposed to individual dissents? Or is there any significance to that?
I think that they wanted it to seem like a kind of unanimous protest.
Right.
Now, interestingly, I don't know how many people will agree with this, but when you read the dissent, it's pretty staid. It's not even, it's not like justices ever get rowdy.
Right.
Their Justice Antonin Scalia, who died, often did kind of rhetorically hectored
Yeah.
the majority when he dissented. The liberals in question, that's Stephen Breyer, Elena Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor, don't tend to do that. But in this opinion, it felt as if they were almost resigned, and they weren't meek by any means, but they weren't enraged, and that's, I think, very significant. They joined together to make it seem like it's a big deal for this dissent. And it's only fair to say dissents are traditionally the places where even when you lose, you kind of send a message in a bottle to the future in hopes that your dissent will someday become a majority. But they're not trying to get into the trenches on this. They're even polite. There's a very interesting moment when they shout out to Justice Scalia, and try to recruit him as a ghost to their cause.
Wow.
But it's there's not a lot of significance, I would say, to the fact they wrote together, just a little bit.
How do they try to get the ghost of Scalia on their side?
So when the cases around gay marriage were coming down the pike, there were stages, and when Justice Scalia protested one of the first stages, like in a case called Windsor, United States v. Windsor, he wrote in his dissent, "They're telling you that gay marriage is not the next step, but don't believe them." And of course, now the liberals want to use that warning in their own way. They want to say the majority here assures us that they're not going to cut
Right.
down the other unenumerated rights that are in the Constitution. They're not going to cut down gay marriage, but don't believe them. So it's kind of adroit,
Right.
although it's kind of an insiders kind of move.
Right.
I think that in general the opinion is not going to be widely read. It's very long, and as I say, it's not the most rhetorically aggressive that you could imagine.
Frank Priya writes, who will be the first Republican to have a pregnant mistress come out? Unclear. We'll have to wait and see. And you tweeted out Clarence Thomas concurring, and you quote Clarence Thomas saying, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. Can you extrapolate on that?
Sure. So, Clarence Thomas concurred in the opinion and added some thoughts of his own. And one of those thoughts is that, in a way, agreeing with the liberals that the reassurances that the majority offered that this is just a one-time only thing, it's just about abortion, should be disbelieved. Because he doesn't think that you can get rid of Roe and leave all of those other precedents standing. After all, they depend on the same basic principles, that there are unenumerated rights, that they're to be found in the due process clause, that they relate somehow to privacy. And so he says, look, now that we've one domino has fallen today, and why wouldn't the rest fall? Now, I think doctrinally, he's on firm ground. It's
Right.
very hard to figure out how you would distinguish Roe from, the protection of contraception in Griswold and the protection of gay marriage in Obergefell. I've told you that Alito also said in his majority opinion that no, abortion's different because it affects someone
Right.
else and extinguishes her, his, her, their, its rights.
Right.
But it's either the real question is whether we should fear Thomas's promise to keep pushing.
Right.
Whether we should join the liberals in thinking that the thing to be most anxious about are these other cases. Now, there are, we can get into what some of the other justices say in their concurrences, but right now he's on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas is very frequently an outlier. Even when he's in the majority, he goes to extremes. Sometimes, he's like the bleeding edge, and he constructs a majority over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. He won't be there that long.
Right.
But it's happened that he started out as, a minority of one, and he gets a majority. And that, of course, could happen. But, a crucial character here as of now is Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote his own concurrence. And he says some interesting things, which are trying to soften the blow of this decision. One of them, which we might want to get into, is that this decision not only returns the matter to the states, but also allows Congress to pass its own abortion rights law. And it's not as if he's necessarily favorable to abortion personally, but he implies that that's a viable option going forward. Now, that's not something that Alito, let alone Thomas, would ever have said, but it's quite significant. So a lot depends on whether we think these other right wingers are likely to join Thomas anytime soon in extending the doctrinal logic of this decision. I myself don't think that's going to happen. And it's the Griswold and Obergefell are much more widely accepted by many, many more Americans than Roe ever was. And so the logic of the doctrine is one thing, but whether the justices would, push against that kind of consensus is another.
Mm-hmm. And what about the political landscape? What do you think could happen now? Should happen now? What are the options that people have? The Democratic Party, or I guess before that, what kind of job have the Democrats done so far?
Well, I think poor. So if you kind of get real for a moment, this is of enormous symbolic, importance today. But the truth is that, like so many rights, the court has cut down the abortion right long before. The truth is, it already overruled Roe v. Wade, de facto, and today as de jure. That was in 1992 in the case called Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and actually within 5 years of Roe v. Wade, the court made clear that the abortion right was going to be class free, which meant that the Constitution didn't care if you're poor and couldn't access the abortion right. And so the result of the kind of hollowing out of the abortion right, almost from the day it was announced, is that it remained until today, but very weak, and especially in the South, very difficult to access. Now, I'm not trying to minimize or trivialize the damage done today, but we've had a 50-year regime of Roe v. Wade, but not one that the Democrats have done a great deal to bolster. And in fact, they've eroded it in some ways. So an example would be the Hyde Amendment. Henry Hyde, a Democratic politician, made it very difficult for the federal government ever to spend money to fund abortions. Then finally, of course, we could get into a discussion of whether there was ever an opportunity for the Democrats to protect abortion rights by announcing it in federal legislation. Famously, Barack Obama made that an item on his agenda in 2008 when he ran for president, but then said it wasn't a priority and that he demoted it. I'm not sure it would ever have been easy for the Democrats to pass such a bill, but they've begun introducing it in both houses of Congress for about a decade now. And they came within one vote a few weeks ago of passing it in the Senate. And so the real question is, are the Democrats going to push through and get that legislation passed? They could come out and say, we are making the next elections about abortion rights. And if the American majority really wants them, which polls say they do, they just need to give the Democrats continued control of the House and a couple more senators. if that happened, all that would be required is to blow up the filibuster. And then the Democrats could say, fine, the Supreme Court gave the abortion rights and took them away. We give them back through congressional action. There could be a challenge to that law in court, and we could talk about the details of that. But, most rights we've gotten in American history have come from Congress. After the Civil War, the 1866 Civil Rights Act, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. After Jim Crow, there was the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act of the 1960s. We can think of many federal laws that give out rights because a majority backed them. The Americans with Disabilities Act. And to me, the $64 million question is, why aren't the Democrats pushing hard to pass a federal abortion rights statute? Now, they can do other things. I mean, just to give, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but short of that law, which just says that Roe v. Wade is codified, or better, it's codified and funded, which the Supreme Court, never required. The Democrats can do various sneakier things. For example, they can mess with the Food and Drug Administration and say that state laws that are teeming now as of today to prohibit abortion have been preempted already by FDA regulations. The federal government could buy land in the states that prohibit abortion and say state laws are inapplicable on this land and let abortion clinics operate on them, and so forth and so on. But I think, to me, the really exciting and necessary step, as with all our rights, is for Congress to commit to them and fund them, because without that, they don't mean a lot. Courts are not, the right entities to give them out and defend and enforce them, and especially not fund them.
So what should courts be doing? What is the Supreme, what should be the purview of the Supreme Court?
Well, in many countries there are two different high courts, and that's because there are two different things that you might want courts to do when they're at the apex of the system. And we've just merged those two functions in one institution. One is to say, one of those functions is, look, it's a big country. There are lots of courts all over, and they don't always agree about what the law means, what the statutes that Congress has passed ought to be read to imply. And that kind of court just decides, how to resolve conflicts. Now, when it does so, it's just saying we're going to take our best guess that the statute means the following. And of course, if Congress doesn't like that answer, it can pass a new statute. And of course, we need that kind of institution because, the law is always unclear. And when it gets applied in specific situations, there are going to be new questions that the legislatures might not have, thought hard about, or the legislators might have just done a poor job. And so courts have a lot of, importance in that regard. Most of all, we need courts to enforce the law. If Congress passed an abortion rights statute and some sheriff, violated that statute, we'd need to take that person to court and say you violated the law, and we'd need a judge to hold him to account. So that's all the good stuff, and good and necessary. Then there's this other function, which is basically saying what the Constitution means as a final matter. It's especially noxious when the Supreme Court says the Constitution sadly requires us to invalidate federal law, which has happened a lot. I mean, Obamacare had it happen to a big part of it once and was in court 3 times and barely survived each one because the right could go ask the Supreme Court to throw out the law.
Right.
And then we come to rights. And here I think we have to look hard at kind of history and how liberals have lived it. Because what liberals did was said, well, wait, we could also use this power that the Supreme Court has to be the final interpreter of the Constitution to get our values kind of through the system when we don't have the time or energy or will to convince our fellow citizens and pass federal laws that protect them. And that's the story, I think, of the middle of the 20th century, when the court became a liberal superweapon. And I think we look back at that period and say, yes, there were a lot of victories, including Roe v. Wade itself, but it incited the right to capture the superweapon. The empire struck back. And now they're using it to give us rights we don't want, like gun rights, and take away the rights that we relied on the court to provide. And so, what if we just shut that part of the Supreme Court down, let it do the work of, interpreting statutes, applying them in litigation, but not to have control, especially not final control over the Constitution.
Oh, so why do you think Kavanaugh said that the Congress could create a law about abortion?
Well, Kavanaugh is an interesting figure, and it's only been a few years he's on the court. He tends to side with most of all with the Chief Justice. So in our wacky system, he's like one of the centrist justices. So we have 3 to the left. In real life, they're actually centrists.
Right. Right.
We have 3 to the right. In real life, they're actually reactionaries. And then we have 2 who are said to be centrists, even though they're actually, conservatives. And Kavanaugh is one. And, his view in his concurrence today was that basically we shouldn't, let the court get involved in this topic at all on anyone's side. And the court was inserted in abortion politics, which he says are so divisive and so unclear, by the liberals. And now, the conservatives want to use the court, for example, to, announce fetal personhood. Kavanaugh seems to be saying, of course, he could just be lying, but, all we have to go on is this concurrence. He seems to be saying, let's get the court out of the business of taking anyone's side in abortion. And along the way, he says, look, maybe the answer is for Congress to protect abortion rights. If not, it's just up to the states, and the states will each go their own way. Now, that's very scary for us because we know that 26 states
Right.
are going their own way against women. And that's why I think the progressive response has to be at the level of the federal Congress. But it's very interesting that in passing, Kavanaugh says, well, maybe they ought to act, and not only mentions the states.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just confused about why he would do that. What do you think is?
Well, really, this is hard to remember, but before Kavanaugh became, radioactive as a result of, the confirmation hearings, he was very clubbable, and he was seen to be, a friend of liberals and, a good conservative. And he was invited to teach at Harvard Law School. And actually, one law professor, seeing the writing on the wall for Roe v. Wade, proposed that we uncancel Kavanaugh so that he would save abortion rights. Now, he didn't do it, and he wasn't uncanceled, but he did not take as radical a stance as the rest of the majority, and certainly not as Clarence Thomas. And so I'm just saying,
Right.
Any port in a storm, there's something to work with in that one concurrence, and he's someone to watch,
Hmm.
especially to see, does he go down the slippery slope that the liberals rightly warn about, in taking this case as a warrant to throw out the right to contraception or the right to gay marriage.
Right. And why do you think the Dems haven't been more aggressive about this?
Well, historically, there were a fair number of pro-life Democrats, and Joe Biden was one of them. And so, there's something specific about abortion, but I think the basic issue, as on across the board with the Democrats, is that they're centrists. And I think when it comes to the Supreme Court, they have had a cult of the Supreme Court. They're the ones in the 50s, 60s, and 70s who relied on it, to get their work done when they couldn't muster majority support for things like the desegregation of schools, for abortion, for gay marriage. Maybe if the Supreme Court hadn't acted, we might not have needed Obergefell, at least in most states. But as a result of all that, and as a result of like basic civics education that we still receive, where we're taught to venerate the Supreme Court, we're taught that it's apolitical, we're taught that it's a bulwark of freedom, that is essential to democracy. And of course, the Democrats are I think drank that Kool-Aid, and I think it's too bad because, of course, the court is political. When it has this superpower to decide what the Constitution means and trump other actors, it's making policy when it does so. And if it's captured by people we disagree with, as it is now, it's making policy we disagree with. And the liberals, I think, immunized it from scrutiny for many years. And that added to the syndrome, which we know that they suffer from on so many other issues, of basically, trying to make bargains with the Republicans or hoping things will go away, not challenging entrenched power themselves. One of this, I think most disappointing things about the Supreme Court in our current Gilded Age is that it's incredibly business friendly. We have an opportunity now to look, because abortion rights are understandably and rightly, so important to so many people, to look at, the entire role of this institution. And it's a neoliberal institution. And of course, the Democrats, until recently, and maybe still, have little problem with that. Even the so-called liberals, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and like the current liberals, Stephen Breyer, Elena Kagan, and so forth, are part of that very business-friendly jurisprudence. And so maybe that's why the Democrats don't challenge it, because a lot of libertarian decisions come down the pike, and liberals have frequently joined it in the last 40 years. So I think we just need immense pressure, as on the Democratic Party in general, to get a very different approach to this institution.
Do you think part of it is for fundraising, and like just a quick way to point to the difference between Dems and Republicans?
Well, I think that's certainly part of it. I think it made sense to a lot of Democrats to say the problem is Mitch McConnell, because, of course, when Mitch McConnell engaged in these various hijinks to deny the current attorney general a hearing when he was nominated as a justice, and then to get to Trump justices appointed under more iffier circumstances, and then a third without a lot of controversy. Democrats cried foul and said norms were broken.
Right.
Remember that whole discourse in the Trump years. And there's nothing wrong with the Supreme Court in itself. It's just kind of the accident of Mitch McConnell messing with it. Now that obscured a lot of truths, I think. It was good messaging for fundraising, I'm sure, because it's fun to hate Mitch McConnell.
Right.
But the truths that this messaging obscured, as I see it, are kind of three truths. One is that the Supreme Court was always political, and it was always a weapon serving whoever captured it. Another is this right-wing drift has been going on literally for 50 years. One of the great ironies today is that that right-wing drift began before Roe v. Wade came down, when the Earl Warren's court ended and Richard Nixon began making some crucial appointments to the bench, and that was at the turn of the 1970s, even before Roe v. Wade. And then I think there's thirdly, there's just this very business-friendly jurisprudence. Remember, we're looking at one case, and the Supreme Court decides
Right.
80 year in, year out. We talk about 2 or 3 every June. But the hits have kept on coming, and the Democrats might not see a lot they don't like, just these exceptional major cases where they cry foul. But the bigger picture is one that with their neoliberal tendencies they haven't had much problem with. And so it was let's say convenient to blame Mitch McConnell.
Right. So because the corporate agenda is so bipartisan?
Essentially, I think that's a very big part of what accounts for why both parties really have allowed so much power to be taken by the Supreme Court, because it can fly under the radar and basically give out corporate rights. So to go back to my earlier point about how the court gives out a lot of rights we don't want, like gun rights. Well, for decades, it's been giving out corporate rights. But, not enough people complained, and neither party had any problem with that result.
Right. What were the other? Can you talk a little bit about the other recent decisions from the Supreme Court? There was one about guns and one about Miranda.
Sure. So the big one is, from earlier this week, and it basically invalidated a New York gun regulation on the grounds that it interfered with Second Amendment rights. In particular, the right for law-abiding citizens to have access to weapons that they can then carry. And this is a kind of amazing case, because it's a wonderful example of the fact that, in spite of all the talk in Alito's opinion today about defending only age-old rights, the right wingers on the court are very willing to just make up new ones. That happened very clearly in 2008 in a famous case called District of Columbia v. Heller. And this year's case, which is called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, is basically just a kind of extension of Heller, and it essentially invents a right for which there's very little historical basis, an individual right to carry a weapon. That's not in the Second Amendment, and it's very hard to find evidence either in Supreme Court cases for the first 200 years of the Republic, or kind of in popular discourse at any point that any Americans thought there was such a right. But the conservatives on the court have essentially invented one in the past decade and a half. And, it's a terrible look because within a few days you have a decision that gives out gun rights and then one taking away abortion rights. And it's very hard to argue that like one has deeper roots than the other. And so it seems like, just extraordinary hypocrisy. What it means is that even this attempt to pass a federal gun law that would regulate, weaponry, that actually was agreed to today in a bipartisan compromise. That law may face some heavy weather at the Supreme Court because this court is incredibly eager to enforce its newly amended gun right. And it's also worth mentioning its eagerness in a series of cases, but including one this term and last week, to enforce the right to the free exercise of religion. Now, in fairness, that one is in the Constitution, in the First Amendment. But this court, these conservatives, have interpreted that right on steroids. So we get a picture of like the rights of those the court likes: gun owners, Christians, and religious people more generally. And then there are those they don't like: women. And if law is just, what you can get 5 votes to selectively privilege, then why do we have this institution? Why not have wins and losses in the legislature? Because if the legislature were in charge of this, progressives wouldn't always win. They might not win, that much, but at least we'd know that it's a policy decision. And we debate the merits of whether to have one law or another, one set of protections rather than another. The trouble is that, the Supreme Court is, disguising its own agency. They're making the law and saying the Constitution made them do it. And that's where I have a problem with it. It's not honest, and it diverts Americans from, thinking about what really matters, which is, well, what laws should we have? What rights should be protected? And letting the Congress, through a majority rule, then follow the popular will.
Right. Well, I'm very excited. So this has been amazing, and I'm so excited that you're giving us this legal expertise. And it's always fun to have a jurist criticize the legal system. We're also going to bring on another guest, and we're gonna talk more about the politics that we've been talking about. And this next guest, well, she is she's an author. She was a presidential candidate. She may be a presidential candidate once again. We don't know. We're waiting and seeing. And her name is Marianne Williamson. Welcome, Marianne.
Oh, thank you, Katie. Good to see you.
You too. This is Samuel Moyn, Marianne Williamson.
Hi. So nice to meet you.
What a privilege.
We're just talking about the decision, and we're talking about lots of things. But one of the things that we were also touching on is the way that the Democrats have failed to deliver on Roe v. Wade. So what are your thoughts on that?
Did you hear Nancy read her poem?
I have it, actually. Here, Brad, can we play Nancy's poem?
Yeah. And then there was something else. Did you see the House members on the steps of the Capitol singing "God Bless America"? That was
I heard about
wonderful
that.
piece of performance art as well. Yeah, it's disgusting.
Look for that. Yeah.
I think the Republicans have never appeared so mean, and the Democrats have never appeared so clueless and weak.
Yeah.
I think some of the Democrats in various states are taking action and behaving in very strong, powerful ways. But on a federal level, I think it's not only is it pathetic, but some of the people, like certain ex-presidents, who could have taken care of this over the years, they really should not have weighed in today. They should really just step aside right now. And for the president himself, you know, he gave us a nice history lesson. I appreciate that he's sad. But even there, it with the president and also with Nancy, there was a text about an hour after the decision asking for money because she, like the president, say this is on the ballot in November. Meanwhile, as we all know, Speaker Pelosi was down there supporting almost single-handedly Henry Cuellar, the last Democratic pro-choice House member. And then on the other hand, yeah, this woman should resign. This woman absolutely resign. For the Democrats to have any chance, the
whole leadership,
Democrat,
the whole
leadership. That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
They should just resign en masse and sort of apologize as they're walking out the door.
Yeah, right. So, and Cuellar, of course, was anti-choice, and the leaders.
NRA rating, A rating from the NRA too.
Right.
He's a doll, isn't he?
Yes, a doll. And Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and James Clyburn were all stumping for Cuellar against the pro-choice Latina woman who was running against him, who was challenging him.
Meanwhile, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just wanted to show. Well, I want to show Brad. Can we show that clip of Nancy's poem?
I'm personally overwhelmed by this decision. From time to time, I quote this poem by Ehud Manor. He's an Israeli poet. I met his wife when I've been in Israel. He says, "I have no other country, even though my land is burning. Only a word in Hebrew penetrates my veins, my soul, with an aching body and with a hungry heart. Here is my home. I will not be silent, for my country has changed her face. My country has changed her face. I shall not give up on her. I shall remind her and sing into her ears until she opens her eyes." Clearly, we hope that the Supreme Court would open its eyes.
There you go.
There's just so much wrong about
so much
that.
better than instead of thoughts and
so
prayers,
much
we get
wrong
thoughts and prayers and poems. Yeah.
I have no problem with poetry, but the implicit message there was that, you know, she's not one of the most powerful Americans, and instead has to just passively accept the, you know, news from on high. Actually,
exactly.
we need to challenge the Supreme Court. And, you know, poetry is really important in getting people, you know, mobilized potentially, along with all kinds of other, you know, art and rhetoric. But her rhetoric was basically about kind of prostration and abdication.
Also, you know, not that I really want to get into it, but she is in support on her Israeli policies of everything that poem was arguing against. I mean, she was even clueless about Israel on that one. So, but I think in terms of challenging the Supreme Court, you know, this is basic psychology. If daddy has abused you, but mommy only wrings her hands, she doesn't call the police, she doesn't barge in, she doesn't rescue you from daddy, but just wrings her hands and says, honey, after daddy's given you this whooping, I'm going to give you some ice cream and cookies. You will grow up to be angrier at mommy. And so the rage that people feel, people know how evil this far-right cadre is that is trying to take over the country. The rage now is at the Democrats for not doing anything. As you were saying, Samuel, there's no challenge of the Supreme Court. You know, I was reading recently about the history of the Supreme Court. It's fairly modern that we are giving to the Supreme Court. You know, we talk about co-equal, but we act now like they're more co-equal. And they're not. And they're, like when you were talking about challenging them, they should at least be having a conversation about expanding the court. They should be having a conversation about ending the filibuster. They should be having a conversation. You know, when I heard Letitia James, the Attorney General from New York, you know, she was strong. This is what we're going to do in New York. But on a federal level, it is just pathetic.
Yeah.
Our greatest presidents did confront the Supreme Court, Abraham Lincoln,
Absolutely.
Franklin Roosevelt, whereas, the press secretary today for Joe Biden said he's already announced long ago that he doesn't favor adding new justices. Well, then what is your plan? Again,
And
it's,
what are you there for?
meek acceptance.
Yeah. Can you just share a little bit about how Lincoln and F.D.R confronted the Supreme Court and how that could apply to today?
Absolutely. So Lincoln obviously got involved in the Civil War, but once it started, he and the Republicans in Congress began passing laws that would have been held unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, like in effect overruling the worst decision in Supreme Court history, Dred Scott. And Lincoln first says, well, it doesn't matter, we're just ignoring the Supreme Court now. We're running the country out of the executive branch and the legislative branch. And actually they did court pack during the Civil War. And then FDR, having seen the earliest attempt to enact the New Deal, shot down by the Supreme Court, mounted a challenge. And, we can get into details, but basically the Supreme Court was forced to relent because of the threat of court packing. It's amazing that now people will tell you, well, court packing failed. Actually, it's the reverse. The threat of it, along with, the massive support of the American people in the 1936 election, basically forced the Supreme Court to change its tune. And the question is, what are we going to do to make that happen again?
And there's nothing in the Constitution that says that we can't. There is no number mentioned in the Constitution. So it's not that outrageous an idea. Now, some people say, yes, but if we expand our people, they'll just expand their people when they have the chance. And certainly that's true. But I would agree, I would think that both of you would agree with me that this is, it seems to me Americans have lost our capacity to respond to an emergency. Things are happening now that are emergencies, and extreme measures are valid, not measures that go, that abuse the law or an overreach, but measures that do have an emergency nature, urgency to them. And I think something like packing the court is a valid conversation because this is an emergency moment. Some fundamental freedom is being threatened, is not just being threatened here, has been taken away.
Brad, can you show the members taking these desperate measures for this desperate moment? Wow. Sorry, I should have given a trigger warning for that, but yeah. Yeah, there we have it. Someone has a question. Thomas asked, do you think that the SCOTUS ruling will create momentum for activists to demand Congress fund programs that benefit children, universal pre-K, subsidized childcare, et cetera?
I think that we have a closely divided country in what we think of as a democracy. The division is unreal because it's manufactured by the Electoral College and the Senate and so forth. But in this Congress, there's no hope, and Joe Biden clearly doesn't plan to bring to bear enough pressure on recalcitrant members. We saw that with Build Back Better. So, I'm hoping that he and other Democrats, make abortion rights a kind of wedge issue to get a bigger majority, or find some other way to win elections better than they have lately. Because only under those conditions can we get, progressive legislation. It's not going to be, with the people in charge now and with the, current numbers, and especially in the Senate.
Now, I know, Samuel, you have to leave fairly soon, and thank you so much for your generous time. Any final things you want to talk about, mention, discuss?
I hope, that even though he's against court packing, and his press secretary repeated it today, Joe Biden did, call this commission together. We've totally forgotten about that, but it looked at a range of, solutions to the crisis. And, the funny thing is, having commissioned the thing, Joe Biden, just threw it away or put it in the drawer. So I think we need to exert some pressure on him to take it out, because there's a good faith, legitimate debate to have about what our best tactics are now. And we have to get Joe Biden to commit to a plan that's not just, praying the Supreme Court does better next time.
Right.
And, it's only from below that we can instigate a kind of genuine kind of debate about what our next moves are.
And I had one final question. Now, of course, it just escaped me. Okay, well, we'll have to have you back
Anytime,
Samuel, because you're, as always, extremely enlightening. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet
Nice
you,
meeting you,
Marianne.
Samuel. Thank you.
Marianne, you and I are apparently part of some of the women responsible for this. Did you see that?
Yes, we're very powerful.
We're very powerful.
I read that today. It's all our fault. We did
all
this.
our fault. Yeah, we are some of the women who are responsible for this.
Mhm.
You, me, Susan Sarandon, Crystal Ball, Brianna Joy Gray.
All our friends.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
Nina.
oh, good. I've had them all on the show. And Nina Turner. Yeah. But you tweeted something about getting a text from Nancy asking for donations.
Well, I didn't get a personal text. I got the same text every Democrat got.
Yeah.
Right an hour later, as I said, after she herself supported the pro-choice candidate, she's asking for money in order to save Roe v. Wade.
The anti-choice candidate. Freudian slip. You wish.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pro-life.
Right. They say, yeah. Well, what is your hope for moving forward? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, quite seriously, I think that there's so much to this, obviously. This, all jokes aside, and we've tried to find some levity here in the last few minutes, but this is terrible. This is an attack on more than reproductive rights. It's an attack on women. It's an attack on women's agency. Remember, if you tell a woman she can't have an abortion, you're not just laying claim to what she does with her body right now. You're laying claim to saying what she has to do for the next 18 years of her life. You are limiting her choices in all kinds of areas. And Katie, I do see abortion as a moral issue. I do. But it is an issue of private morality. It is not an issue of public morality. And I think, except in the case with the exception of sex with children, I don't think the government should have any say in what we do with our bodies or anything to do with our bedrooms or what we do there. It's an interesting issue. This is an effort, this is the crowd, remember, that talks against activist judges.
Right.
This is an activist judiciary that actually is trying to redesign American society. There is something here about trying to end the era of sexual freedom. For a lot of these people, I don't think it's about abortion. It's about controlling women, putting what they perceive to be the sexual rights of women under the control of a man. I mean, this is really trying to take us back decades into a different era where women did not have choices about their lives. As many people have said today, I'm sure this is your concern, it's certainly mine, who knows where they're going to stop? Because remember, even though we're upset tonight, they're popping the champagne bottles. Those justices are getting telegrams of congratulations and flowers and fruit baskets or whatever. They're just on a roll. And I think that it is a valid concern that they are thinking this is just the beginning. Too many people that they feel are too free. It's really an anti-democracy thing. It's we've lived in eras where America was about expanding rights, and this is about constricting rights. And in opposition to where many countries are moving. Look what just happened in Colombia. And then on the other hand, very much in lockstep with some of the authoritarian movement in countries like Poland and Hungary and Turkey and so forth. So I think that people are, particularly women, are having to process all of this. But I do think, you know, you're waking a giant here. There's something, if we really wake up to what this means. And of course, we didn't get any help on this from the Democratic Party today. This is just so outrageous, the weakness, the wussiness of these people. But despite them, not because of them, but almost despite them, I hope that American women will just rush to the polls in November. Because at this point, it's between the abusive ones and the weak ones. We're going to have to go with the weak ones for now and do everything we can to make them strong. I only hope that women all over the country today, particularly young women, were thinking very seriously about running for office and running for office in state elections, because the left is going to have to start focusing on state legislatures in a way that we haven't been used to doing. We've been saying this for a while now, but now we need to get really serious about it.
Someone put in the chat that it's her birthday today, and she's your same age. So here we go. I guess Lisa.
Mine is next week.
Happy
birthday.
Must be 25.
Yeah. I'm turning 70 in 2 weeks.
Wow, you look very young. You really do. I don't want to object.
I don't know if it's like thank you for I look young. If you could just tell me I look good.
Yeah, you're right. You look great.
Thank you.
That is true. Yeah. And happy birthday, Lisa.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
Yeah. We're all Cancerians, right? Are people born today?
Yeah,
Cancers
that's
too?
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're a Cancer as well.
Yeah. 7-11. And thank you so much to Delete, I think is his name, who just became a new member. And you guys can all become members of the YouTube channel, and you get great emojis and Bodhi emojis, the little doggy, my little doggy that Brad makes. And speaking of birthdays and age, here, I'm just going to show this. Here I am with my dad at a pro-choice rally. And here's my dad and my mom at the same rally. So
that's so amazing. That I love those pictures. I mentioned to you in our text thread with some of our friends, you look just like Drew Barrymore there.
Yeah, I do. Like when she was in E.T.
And went on the Tonight Show. You could have been a stand-in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And is there anything? What else, Marianne, should we talk about? I mean, people, whenever we talk about 2024, people ask me, "Is Marianne going to run?"
What do you say, Katie?
I say, I don't know.
I'll let you know if there's an answer.
Okay. I say, I hope so.
It would kind of be part of it that if you were doing it, you'd have to tell people.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So no official response.
No, this is not a time in American history to play around. It's not a time to clutter the field. I think it's time for all of us, actually, to look very deep inside ourselves and ask, how can I best serve? How can I best help disrupt the status quo? And I don't think the status quo is going to disrupt itself. And I think that's becoming very clear. So then the question is, what part can I best play? And for me, and like I said, I think this is a question millions of us are asking ourselves. For me, I know that the decision to run, the only way it would be the correct thing to do would be if it was a campaign worthy of the effort. Truly something that could present the American people with a realistic option of that fundamental change. Samuel was talking earlier about Lincoln and F.D.R. And I just finished a biography of F.D.R. and Eleanor. And when he looked at the Depression, the issue that became operative was that the alleviation, he felt that alleviating people's suffering was not enough. We needed fundamental economic reform. And that is the option that must now be presented to the American people. Whether I'm the best person to do that, and whether I could do that in a way that truly creates that possibility, both as a candidate and also as a president, we'll see.
Any questions, Brad, for Marianne? Brad's a huge Marianne fan.
Where are you, Brad? Hey.
Hey, Marianne. Thank you so much.
See you.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you.
And yeah, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
You make 70 look like 35. So
thank you. Well, my clothes are on.
But but do you think there is, I mean, anything between now and November that you would like to see happen, or do you think that the best way for people to use their to channel their rage, it basically, you know, in a productive manner, if that's possible?
Well, we all need to remember what November represents. Mm-hmm. Each and every one of us have a congressional election. A third of the country has a Senate election. This is a big deal. Right. And not all the primaries have occurred yet. So right. For instance, Katie participated in a live stream that we did at a site called candidatesummit.com.
Right.
Some of those people are winning their primaries and doing okay, Katie. You know, it's very, very exciting. And you can go to Candidate Summit and see. This is the time to get very, very involved in these races. You know, hope is born of participation in hopeful solutions. And we cannot leave electoralism out of the larger panoply of problem solving options. And, you know, they've been saying forever, you know, it's going to be a red wave. It's going to be a red wave. This is not predetermined.
Yeah.
And as disappointed as we all are in so much of the Democratic Party right now, this is not a time to mess around. This is not a time to open the door further for these people who represent a genuinely undemocratic, neo-fascist trend in this country. We absolutely must stand up to this. So yeah, all of us need to get busy. Each and every one of us has a congressional race, and none of us should take anything for granted.
Well, and regardless, I have plenty of criticisms for him, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who had said the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, and it seems like over the past few decades, you know, we may have fallen short on that eternal vigilance part of things. And I think what you're talking about is re-engaging in that. I mean, essentially what he's saying is you need to be engaged in paying attention. You know, otherwise these things will be taken away from you.
You can never consider democracy a fait accompli.
Right.
And that was our mistake. We took it for granted. You know, once again, going back to Roosevelt, he said, democracy is a process. It's not just a thing. You can't just set yourself up. You know what that's like? That's like saying we're married now, so I can relax.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, these are the people who lose their marriages. You know, it's something you must constantly feed. And if you go too many generations of people whose hearts are not ablaze with the democratic possibilities, then the door is open. You know, the things that are happening now are no different than the things that were happening in 1776. 41 out of the 56 signers of the Declaration were slave owners.
Right. Yeah.
So we have always been this sort of bicameral mind, this sort of bipolar character in America between those of us who are ablaze, like I said, are truly passionate about the possibilities of embodiment and manifestation of this all men are created equal thing.
Right.
And forces who, for their own economic purposes, have proven time and time again, in our generation, no less than in any other, that they will do whatever it takes, even unto violence,
Yeah.
and truly heinous things, to make sure that those principles will not be embodied.
So
this is the same group of people. This is the same legacy as the slave owners, you know. So
do you think
it's
then
our turn.
I'm so sorry, but do you think that then that it would be a safe statement to make that that those who would oppose that, we need to come at it with the same dedication and fervor as those who have been dedicated to tearing that away, if that makes sense?
Well, that's funny because I didn't think you were going to end your sentence that way. Yes, they have a conviction. Conviction is a force multiplier. Those who hate, those who want to shut the American experiment down, because that's really what we're talking about here.
Right.
Those who want to shut this thing down have great conviction, and they're at it 24/7.
Right.
So if you have 10 people who hate and then 100 people who love, but the people who hate with conviction, and
Exactly.
the people who love say, I'll be available Tuesdays and Thursdays, you know, between 4 and 7.
Right.
Then the people who hate will carry the day because conviction is a force multiplier. It's not that we need to match their fervor. What I thought you were going to say is we need to match the fervor and the dedication and the commitment of those who successfully pushed back before. We need to identify with the abolitionists. We
Yes.
need to identify with the women suffragettes.
Right.
We need to identify with the civil rights movement, all of whom certainly had the same level of commitment, dedication, fervor, and they also had what Martin Luther King would call cosmic companionship, because they were standing for universal spiritual values, human values, democratic values. And in terms of the suffragettes, and what happened today, this is the first time since the women's suffragette movement that women in America have been institutionally abused. This is an institutional abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And women rose up to deal with it in the women's suffragette movement, and we need to do it in our time just as they did it in theirs.
And also we have to be in the streets, because, and making noise, because, you know, Democrats are not going to do the right thing just because they're in office.
You know, Katie, earlier tonight, I met Brianna Joy Gray. She was over at the courthouse, you know, the Supreme Court. And I couldn't get close. And so we met and we were going to meet. And I said, you know, what was it like? And she said, you know, people have protest zones now.
Right.
And she said, it just felt so impotent. We should have been on a bridge. We should have been shutting down Constitution Avenue. You know, our idea of protest now is we go exactly where they tell us to go.
Right.
The whole point of protest is to inconvenience them.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to find ways to inconvenience them in a very powerful and meaningful and transformational way.
Yeah.
Good trouble.
Yeah.
Good trouble.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Marianne. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's scary, but it was not surprising. And there's a lot of people are definitely going to have to look into, in the meantime, abortion pills, which we did a show on a couple months ago, but those are apparently fairly easy and people should order them before they become illegal. It's a scary moment. And yeah, the Democrats are not delivering. So no matter what, we do have to be, I think, making noise, scaring politicians. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted. I think you press the mute button. Hold on. I can't unmute you. Your mic isn't connected.
Okay, how about now?
Okay, yes, now we can, yeah.
So I was going to say there are 13 states that have trigger laws. I think something like 9 of them went into effect today. And out of those, 5 of them don't even have any exceptions for rape or incest. And also, we've all been
So these
saying,
trigger
well,
laws, just so everyone understands, trigger laws means that they were triggered, like they were set up to go into effect the second this happened. So you already cannot have an abortion in those states.
mhm,
And some of
already.
them, as Marianne points out, have no exceptions for rape or.
They've been planning this for years.
Yeah.
But also, we've been saying, oh, rich women will be able to get abortions. Don't kid yourselves. They're locking the doors. They're locking the windows. They are so criminalizing doctors. They are so seeking to criminalize anyone who they see as having aided or abetted an abortion, that no matter who you are, it could get very, very difficult, very painful.
Right.
Very
Although
horrible
wealthy
in those
women will
states.
be able to just travel out of state, but
Not everybody can just pick up and travel to another state. Some of the states in this country are very, very big.
yeah. No, I'm saying wealthy women will. I mean, it's inconvenient, but it's yeah. Well, anything else, Marianne? Because I know I just sprung this on you last minute.
No, it's always just great to be with you.
Yeah,
and
you too.
See you. See, I have to be on your show to get you to talk to me.
It's true. I do owe you. Yeah, I will text you right after this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Much love to you, Katie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Okay, darling. Bye.
Bye, Marianne. So, guys, thank you so much for joining. I wanted to put this show together, as you know, and that's what we did. And I hope it was helpful for people. Maybe a little inspiring. Also, I just realized, abortion pills are safe and effective. I'll tweet out that episode in case you guys missed it that we did. In fact, I think, Brad, we have another one, right, that we didn't release. We can release that. That goes into more detail with it. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. And I just also wanted to mention, because I had heard a doctor speaking about this earlier today, Katie, was that, like, for example, for people who live in certain parts of Texas, well, number one, apparently Texas may also be moving forward with trying to craft laws which would criminalize women who would travel out of state for those sorts of things. But then also, even if that didn't happen, in some cases, you might be talking about 10-hour car ride in one way. And I can't say for sure personally about this. I don't know enough about it, but these sorts of things might also not be able to occur just on one trip. You might need to go for like a consultation or an evaluation or something. So it's a huge obstacle for a lot of women to think that they would both have the means, like like a car and the extra time and all of that stuff. It's it's not as simple as some might make it out to be.
Right. Coup Save America says, how can I, Katie, and Marianne on my show and Medicare for All event? I don't understand that syntax, but I think you're saying, how can I have Katie and Marianne on my show and Medicare for All event? What's your Twitter handle? And then I'll follow you and you can DM me, because I don't have open DMs. I didn't even know open DMs were a thing when I was until fairly recently. And I thought anyone I could message that meant that they followed me. It was kind of awkward.
Oh.
So, Coup Save America, tell me your Twitter, and then.
And while we're waiting for that, Katie, can I show maybe one of your tweets?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So here we had like clockwork, the kind of shot chaser. Here would be the shot. I better not see one neoliberal.
Nina Turner tweets out, yeah.
I better not see one neoliberal blame Susan Sarandon for Roe when Pelosi, Clyburn, and every establishment pack and their mama was campaigning in Texas last month for anti-choice Henry Cuellar, and the chaser would be
this person, kind of disturbed person, maybe disturbed. I should make sure I'm not engaging in defamation. I don't know if she's disturbed. She seems disturbed to me, but I have no idea. Yeah, she writes, here's the list of women that are responsible for why Roe versus Wade has been overturned. Susan Sarandon, Brianna Gray, not even Joy Gray, Brianna Gray, Nina Turner, Rose McGowan, Crystal Ball, Katie Halper, Marianne Williamson, and the other women I'm missing. She doesn't mention Amy Coney Barrett, which is kind of funny.
I mean, it's an awesome list.
I know, it's a great list
of women, but I mean, and you would leave out that.
Right. Oh, right. In case you're wondering, Nancy Pelosi is still supporting the only anti-abortion House Democrat. Yeah.
So that's super weird that she didn't make the list.
Yeah, she invisibilized Nancy.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
That's just rude.
That's just rude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming to this emergency last minute. I didn't mean to make you go, Brad.
Oh,
but
okay.
Last minute stream. I hope it served you guys well.
Yeah.
Oh, RBG, can you show my tweet about RBG? Because people are accusing.
The one that we just showed?
Oh yeah, did you not see my tweet about RBG? Hold on. Hold on. Oh, Breeze. Shots fired from Brianna Joy Gray. Here's my tweet. I'll send it to you. This one got some hate.
Uh-oh.
Didn't I tweet this out about planking? Hold on. Here it is. I'll send it to you in the message.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I hope you guys, I hope this was a good stream for you guys. And it was very last minute, but Bodhi's not here. That's why.
Oh, no. All right. Let's see.
Can you zoom in on it?
Yeah.
So glad RBG kept planking instead of retiring from the Supreme Court. And I took a screenshot that was going around. Just keep planking. America to Justice Ginsburg. Just keep planking. And a picture of her planking, which is good, but retiring would have been better. And then she could have had more time to keep planking.
Yeah.
Obviously, Obama went to visit her and wanted her to retire, so he could appoint someone else, and she didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunate.
And I know that I didn't run it past you, Katie, but I have like a 15-20 second clip of Biden can we play that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, here we go.
I call on everyone, no matter how deeply they care about this decision, to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable. Threats and intimidation are not speech. We must stand against violence in any form, regardless of your rationale.
I just thought that was really interesting that the picking and choosing when to become a pacifist or a peacenik.
Right.
So in this context, violence is never the answer, but regarding school shootings or something like that, we just need more guns in schools, or if it's Black Lives Matter or whatever, that it doesn't seem to be the same call for nonviolence.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to mention Ukraine, but
right. Not to mention not that
there isn't violence obviously on both sides, but what was that last word what was the last word?
Regardless of your rationale, I think was what he said. Let's just double check.
Regardless of your rationale.
Yeah, regardless of your rationale.
Yeah. Well,
so regardless of any rationale, violence is never the answer.
Right. So take that, Yemen.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Palestine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't mourn organized, Joe Hill. That is true. That is a good thing to live by.
Thank you, Reverend Edmund.
Yes, thank you. All right. Well, I will see you guys next Tuesday, right? Thank you so much, Brad. Keep subscribing if you're not subscribed. Of course, you can become patrons and at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And you'll see a great thing from Brianna Joy Gray. Also, your being Patreons just helps make this show possible, because
Yes.
we live in a capitalist world system, so we need to pay for things.
Yes.
Like people's labor, obviously.
Yep.
So that's why. I mean, that's why we ask for Patreon support. So also an easy way to support the show is, of course, by liking it. How many likes do we have?
I don't know.
If you're watching and you like this and you didn't already like it, please like it, and please subscribe, and please share share when you can.
So we currently, we've got around like 420
Oh, that's
likes.
good. That's good. Great.
Yeah, for being an impromptu emergency stream.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I will see you all Tuesday, and thanks so much, Brad, for all your help, and thanks for the likes going up. Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna have to really make people like at the beginning of the show.
You got to do the harsh teacher.
I'll have a glass of wine that I keep drinking until
I will turn this stream around if you kids do not like the
Oh, the person who asked about coming on the show did not tell me his Twitter handle, so
no.
Use the hash. I don't know what to do.
Well, hopefully they'll come back.
Come back. Yeah, come back and write in the chat. You don't have to super chat. You can just write a free chat. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Love everyone who came by and like the stream. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.